joining me to debate this is the commentator of the Times of London and the former Olympian, Matthew Said, the former footballer and football manager, now host of Common Sense podcast, Joey Barton, the host of Crane and Company, David Cohn, and host of the Luke Beasley Show, Luke Beasley. That's the problem. Anyway, fascinating debate.
But by the way,
where I take issue though, Piers, is when we are forcing athletes to take a stance, okay? And this really gets to what are you called in this life to do?
Good. And now let's get back to the people you said someone could die. You know what we're gonna look back on when we look at this moment in history? We're gonna think about how ridiculous it was that people were blowing out of proportion random culture war issues instead of talking about the people who are actually dying.
However, I have to confess to hypocrisy, because as you were talking, Piers, I thought to myself, well, hang on. I've written a number of columns saying that Russia should be thrown out of global sport because of the invasion of Ukraine.
Right. What are we doing, people? We have an assault on our democratic republic like we haven't seen in generations, and we're still talking. We're just like jerking each other off right now.
No, what is your view, though? Should they
take
be allowed
the sex
to compete?
test? Damn it!
Well, why not?
No, I said take it.
Were you critical of that, or
the rainbow laces, Piers? You know that.
All right, so you've been very supportive of that.
But we all, I'm American. Americans just watched. The world just watched the president come out in his administration and lie about people who had been shot during protests.
You know, if everything is politicized, sport, art, private lives, you're moving towards totalitarianism.
And inevitably, two phrases come up. One, shut up and dribble, which you brought up, and two, Republicans buy sneakers too.
We have to have the ability for people to showcase their beliefs. Sunlight being the best disinfectant.
I don't like the armbands and the laces and the taking of the knee. All of these are politically contentious, even things that might seem politically neutral.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another Piers Morgan Uncensored, where we're gonna dip our toes, if you will, into the discussion going on right now about all of the Winter Olympics and all of these athletes signaling their virtue. Well, that's how one side is putting it out there, signaling their virtue, and the other side is putting it up as, well, they're just expressing their opinion. So we're going to discuss all of this, and we're going to go back and forth. Should athletes get out there and talk politics, right? We're going to have that discussion. We're going to go over all kinds of nonsense, and we're going to talk about all this stuff. So you guys do me that favor, smash that like button for me, subscribe if you're new around here, share this video anywhere and everywhere you can, click the join button, sign up and become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow, folks. And look, check out my news videos. We read the news, figure out how we're being manipulated. That's it, right? We talk about it, right? So I want to inform you guys as to what is going on in this world. I talk about news articles that you're not hearing about in the mainstream, if you will. So we talk about stuff the administration is doing, court cases, things of that nature. So if you're into that kind of thing, tune in, turn on, and get informed. And without any further ado, folks, let's get into this.
Do we need to be consistent, or is it actually morally defensible to have one rule for that kind of situation and another for, say, free democratic societies?
Well, tragically, I agreed with almost everything you said in that intro, which is a slightly worrying prospect. I'm massively into politics. I stood for Parliament after the Olympic Games in Sydney, which was one of my last competitions for Tony Blair's Labour Party. I write on politics. I'm going on Newsnight later today to talk about British politics. I'm so obsessed with it that I was at a dinner last night giving a talk with an audience, John Redwood, a former leadership contender for the Conservatives, Lord Lilly. And I think it's great to be interested in politics, but I do believe that a healthy society needs an opportunity to switch off. And sport, for me, largely, is a safety valve. You can relax, get away from the contention. That's such a healthy thing to have in any society. You know, if everything is politicized, sport, art, private lives, you're moving towards totalitarianism. That's what really dictatorial societies had. I mean, my sport was table tennis, and the table tennis players from China were held up in the 50s as icons of revolutionary virtue. They were playing for the regime. And then during the Cultural Revolution, they were bastions of revisionism. That's terribly unhealthy. And I don't like the armbands and the laces and the taking of the knee. All of these are politically contentious. Even things that might seem politically neutral or something we can all support, like we're against racism. But why not we're against sexism or we're against autocracy? Whenever you make a choice about the slogan you're going to emblazon on a football match, it becomes political. However, I have to confess to hypocrisy, because as you were talking, Piers, I thought to myself, well, hang on. I've written a number of columns saying that Russia should be thrown out of global sport because of the invasion of Ukraine. Right. So I think you're right. When you're deeply passionate about an issue, and I think Russia's invasion and continuing onslaught in Ukraine is one of the great atrocities of the modern world, then, yeah, I think I feel like I should speak out. But by and large, that importance of having some aspect of our culture as a way to get away from this deeply polarized political debate, I think, is vital.
You know, it's interesting. I remember the Qatar World Cup when Qatar were getting attacked because homosexuality, for example, is illegal in Qatar. And a lot of people caught in the hypocrisy trap there. David Beckham and others who were big LGBT allies, supposedly, but then took millions to go and work for the Qatar government during the World Cup. But the interesting fact pointed out to me was actually of, I think, the 32 countries that are in the finals, one in, I think, 8 of them, so a quarter of all the countries, it was illegal to be homosexual, right? Most of the African nations that were competing and so on. So, you know, you've got to be morally consistent here. Oddly, you were sounding a little bit like Joey Barton with some of that, which is not something I ever thought I would discover on the airwaves. Joey, good to see you. You know, when I hear Matthew there, I kind of think he's right. I mean, you've been on this thing about virtue signalers and so on for a long time. Do you think there are any exceptions? And if you're honest, have you ever, you know, found exceptions? Have you ever, as a player or a manager, had a cause you've spoken up about? Or have you been morally consistent and never spoken about any of this stuff?
Well, firstly, Pete, you'd be surprised to know that me and Matthew were once neighbours and spent a lot of time together. So it's no coincidence. We do share a lot of conversations, and we've disagreed and agreed on many things. And it's wonderful to see your face, Matthew, as well as the other guys on the panel. Look, for me, I think sport is a huge part of certainly our country and a worldwide culture. And you know, when I think of being a kid, you know, all the different political messages that have, you know, been raised through me watching incredible athletes, whether it was the Olympics or, you know, sport in other countries, you know, raise awareness to it by, you know, taking a stand and saying what they believe. And I believe in a free, you know, democracy, that we have to have the ability for people to showcase their beliefs. You know, sunlight being the best disinfectant. If people believe in something and they want to, you know, raise people's awareness to it, then I do think they should be allowed to do that. I mean, it is difficult, and I do agree with Matthew and how much and how little of it we allow through the gate. You know, sport then becomes, you know, a bit of a pantomime towards the political motives. But I do feel that, you know, if people feel really strongly, like the athletes in the Winter Olympics, I don't agree with what the, you know, the protesting about, because it looks like it's a hot topic in America. But what I do agree with is their right to protest it and raise awareness to it, because I've paid attention to it more now than I ever would have because of these athletes in America. And the discourse and the discussion around my dinner table is about, you know, the rights and the wrongs, and it does allow people to converse, and conversations lead to, I think, better outcomes.
David Cohn, I mean, it struck me when I was watching the Team USA athletes in the Winter Olympics criticising their country and trying to create a bit of a divide between them and what maybe some of their compatriots feel and so on. That to me slightly crosses a line. You know, I was thinking about if it were Team GB athletes, for example, in any Olympics, and they began criticising Britain on an international stage, representing their country with all the flags and all the patriotism that goes with that, I'd be pretty pissed off, I think. You know, I can understand why many Americans have been annoyed about this. What's your view?
Well, Piers, thank you first for having me on. You hit on some very important issues in your open there, and I've had this discussion many times with my two co-hosts, Jake and Blaine Crane, and inevitably two phrases come up. One, shut up and dribble, which you brought up, and two, Republicans buy sneakers too. Now, I have never been in the shut up and dribble camp. I don't believe just because you are an athlete, you should shy away from voicing whatever opinion that you have, provided that you can accept the responsibility and whatever consequences may come from your employer or your family or your community. Muhammad Ali was a world-class athlete. He felt compelled to speak up on the Vietnam War and various other issues. Where I take issue, though, Piers, is when we are forcing athletes to take a stance, okay? And this really gets to what are you called in this life to do? If you feel you are called by God to speak out on such an issue in addition to your athletic ability, then by all means pursue that. But Michael Jordan was also a world-class athlete. He didn't focus on anything but singularly being the greatest basketball player he could be. He said, Republicans buy sneakers too, and I am not going to speak out on any issue that I am not an expert on. And I think that most of us have room in our hearts to respect both approaches there, provided that they are done in a genuine, sincere, and quite honestly, a respectful manner.
It's interesting. Well, Matthew, I was going to actually ask you this, actually, because I think that's just reminded me of a good example of the kind of moral bullying that sometimes goes on to signal one's virtue in sport. And the classic example to me, is it James McLean, the footballer who refuses to wear a poppy? Is that his name? The Irish footballer, Northern Irish footballer? Yeah. And if people, every year it's the same debate. He won't wear a poppy in the run-up to Remembrance Day. And his argument, if you actually listen to him, makes perfect sense. He's from Derry in Northern Ireland, scene of Bloody Sunday, one of the, a real atrocity, really, committed by British troops against the people of Northern Ireland at the time. And he comes from one of the very streets that was most caught up in this. And it would be, in his eyes, a betrayal. And as he pointed out, the poppy represents everyone who has served in the British Armed Forces. It doesn't just mean World War I, World War II. It's everybody, including the members of the parachute regiment who committed that atrocity on Bloody Sunday. And so once I heard his long explanation, I thought, well, who are we to bully him morally into wearing a poppy when that is his reasoning for not wearing it? And I felt the same way about, for example, there have been football players who are committed Christians who, have a problem with homosexuality. I'm a Christian. I don't happen to agree with them, but they are, and it's a religious-based belief in their case. Should they be bullied into wearing LGBT regalia, for example, when they're playing, even if it's in countries like Senegal, where the backlash against their families could be extreme, right, for doing that? And again, I don't think players should be bullied in any sport into doing that kind of thing by governing bodies. So that I think was a really interesting point by David. What do you think, Matthew?
Well, I agree. I think the line here is that Joey's talked about sports people having the right to express an opinion. Of course they have a right to express an opinion. They can do it on Substack or they can go onto a soapbox. But leveraging the cultural collateral of sport, using the sporting arena, the field of play, that's why I have a problem with it. And when governing bodies support the rainbow laces or taking the knee, and then somebody doesn't want to get involved in that, they don't want to be political, that's when it becomes very difficult for them. And one thing I would perhaps say in defence of the American athletes, Piers, that you mentioned, is I think some of them were not expressing an opinion just after the race when a microphone is put in front of their mouth. They did it in the press conferences after, because they were asked specifically of their opinions by the journalists. And then it becomes invidious for them, because these are people who are good at hitting a ping pong ball over there or good at skiing down a slope. They don't necessarily wish to offer an opinion on. We do. That's why we've come on the show. But the thing I just wanted to briefly point out is when Michael Jordan was asked to support the campaign of a Democratic senator, I think, who was trying to unseat Jesse Helms, a Republican who was a bit notoriously on the right and perhaps mildly racist. He said, no, Republicans wear sneakers too. That was a marketing decision. He wanted to use the Nike brand to connect with as many consumers as possible. And Tiger Woods used that too, never said anything controversial, stayed away from it, not because he wasn't political, but because he thought that if he was a billboard for multinational brands, he didn't want to alienate any consumers, Republican or Democrat.
Right.
I think that has shifted.
But that's that guys.
Gary
that's the
Lineker was
old world, though.
Gary
That's the
Lineker was a
old
bit
world.
like that. You know, he was a billboard for Walker's Crisps, and he was very But I think the world has changed a bit, and now Colin Kaepernick and others have leveraged politics in a way that I think makes it actually commercially viable to become quite political. And it's a very interesting change that over the last 15, 20 years.
Well, yeah, folks. So we've seen a trend recently that there's a lot of these people out there. They're just filling up the comment sections with a lot of these creators that are doing things that are not politics. I'll give you an example. There's this guy, right? A lot of people might know him, but all he pretty much does is swing an axe and cut logs. That's what he does on his videos, right? It's something simple. It's a dude thing, I guess. But he come out the other day and made a statement about what's going on with ICE, and I just groaned, right? There's a lot of people that tune into a lot of that they just don't want to hear about politics, right? They want to get away from that because it's so divisive, especially right now. They just don't want to hear about that. That's an opinion that's out there, right? And it's the same thing with sports, right? You can dive off into this world of sports, and you can just get away from all the divisiveness, and we can get to the divisiveness of which team is better or which player is the GOAT, whatever that may be, right? Some people want that. But there's this trend that these people in the comment section that are forcing you to give an opinion one way, and they will cancel you if you go the opposite direction that they want to. I think that's the most ridiculously retarded thing I think anybody can engage in, right? And it's a massive trend right now, right? Like, look, like I said, I saw that dude give the wrong opinion because to me, I look at that like you might not like what ICE is doing, but there were so many statements that were just misinformed statements about what is going on, right? Plus, you look at it in totality, a lot of these people that are anti-ICE right now, they're actually advocating against law enforcement. Like, are you serious about that? You don't like order, essentially. That's just silly. Look, and I understand some people, they want criminal aliens to fill up this country, and I think that's just stupid, right? I think sovereignty is a thing, and it should be upheld, right? I mean, we need to keep our sovereign borders, but these people, they want them to engage, and then we'll cancel them just for the sake of yelling at somebody. It's like that's all they want to do is just yell at somebody for having a different opinion, and they can't see the humanity in these other people, right? Like I had somebody, like today, as a matter of fact, leave a comment on a video talking about RFK Jr. He's like, "You're just a disgusting person." And I'm like, see, you exemplify this whole idea that if I don't agree with you, that this guy is bad or whatever, he's a pseudoscientific shill or whatever you want to call him, right? That I'm a disgusting person, right? So basically you're calling me subhuman. Then he goes on to say, no, I'm not calling you subhuman. You're a disgusting person. It's the same thing, my dude. That's what you're getting at because I don't agree. And guess what? I didn't even give the guy an opinion either way on purpose. On purpose, right? It was a video where I was talking about RFK Jr. was woke for advocating for Columbus Day or for Indigenous Peoples Day, right? When RFK Jr. was running for president. It's an old video, right? And it was like I was going in on that, and I wasn't advocating. I was actually speaking out against RFK Jr. And this guy just made the assumption that I was advocating on behalf of RFK Jr. because he didn't watch the video, right? It's weird, and because I called him out on his BS, right? So he got all mad about that. It's just ridiculous. It's like these people, they just want to, when you're arguing with some of these people about like Alex Peretti or something like that, right? These people just don't care about reality. The fact is, Alex Peretti got himself into a very dangerous situation, and now these people are mad because somebody got killed. They're executing American citizens. Well, I mean, you can think that. It's just not true. It's the farthest thing from the truth, right? There were mistakes made. Once again, I always say my opinion on this has evolved a little bit because I personally think the guy that yelled, "Gun, gun, gun," and pulled the gun out from his small of his back or whatever, that's the guy that started the chain of events that led to his death. There needs to be consequences for that guy, that one individual, because he is the one at fault. He should not have yelled gun, gun, gun while pulling the gun off of this dude, because he neutralized the threat at the same time saying that this guy was a threat, right? And then the gun accidentally goes off. Well, that's why I don't think the guy should get murder charges or anything like that. At bare minimum, right? Bare minimum, he should be fired. But I do think there needs to be some sort of accountability for that, right? Like, I do think he needs his day in court. I'll put it that way. Now, for anybody that doesn't agree with that, right? Look, I love what ICE is doing. I love what the Trump administration is doing right now. I am one of these advocates that we need to get every single criminal alien out of the country. That's just my opinion, right? But even still, that's not going to happen. I can see that. You look at the current rates right now. At current rates, we're only going to get about 2.4 million criminal aliens out of the country through taking these people out of the interior. I'm not talking about self-deportations. Just getting people that don't want to leave out of the country. 2.4 million. Well, if we look at the numbers of the Biden administration, 15 to 20 million criminal aliens came into this country. So I don't understand why liberals are so deranged about this issue, why they're so mad that we're getting some people out. You're still going to have a net positive illegal immigration in this country, and I don't know why these people are so okay with the illegal immigration. They're so okay with these people violating our sovereignty. They're so okay with these people not paying taxes. They're so okay with these people receiving taxpayer benefits. I don't get that. There's nothing to advocate for, and yet they're advocating on these people's behalf. It's the most retarded thing I think I've seen in my entire life. But enough of my rant. Let's keep going.
I'm really hoping to show up and represent my own values of inclusivity, values of diversity and kindness and sharing.
It brings up mixed emotions to represent the U.S. right now, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough time in our country right now, and I think I just continue to represent my values.
Just because I'm wearing the flag doesn't mean I represent everything that's going on in the U.S.
It's been a hard time for the community overall under this administration.
I think that as a country, we need to focus on respecting everybody's rights and making sure that we're treating our citizens as well as anybody with love and respect.
So Luke Beasley, what do you make of that?
Yeah, those are patriots. That is so incredible that they chose to say that. As was referenced, some of them I think got asked, or maybe all of them, and maybe were encouraged to share their view. But we all, I'm American. Americans just watched, the world just watched the president come out in his administration and lie about people who had been shot during protests. To me, I'm a little bit disoriented by this conversation, because it's like all of this thought and stress, and you're referencing, I guess some people out there are upset that they're speaking out. To me, I wish that outrage was channeled at the reasons that they feel the need on the world stage to speak out. But I will say a lot of people are misrepresenting what they're saying. It cracks me up because some of them go, I just think we should represent love and kindness and compassion, to which MAGA reacts, they must be attacking us, which no one even named Trump, it didn't sound like, but was just speaking about the moment of division. And then in many people's views, including mine, an authoritarian shift in the United States. And to use your platform to do the most American thing in the world, which is represent your country and your people while being critical of your government, to me is the height of patriotism. And last thing, I do agree.
But how would you feel? Okay,
a lot of people
how would
are
you feel?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, but Luke, how would you feel if it was a conservative voting athlete at the Summer Olympics during the Biden administration ripping into Joe Biden, for example? In other words, if you're honest, you have an intellectual honesty about this that is not based on partisan politics. It's easy to say, well, I love them whacking Trump or the Trump administration, but would you feel the same way? I had the same debate in an earlier debate about the Bad Bunny Super Bowl performance, right? Everybody, it seemed to me, took politically partisan lines, and a lot of it was ridiculous. because they would have said the complete opposite had it been their go. In other words, if Kid Rock had been the halftime show, all of those saying Bad Bunny's a leftist activist and shouldn't be allowed to perform would have said, oh, great, we've got a right-wing activist. That's fantastic. So my question for you is, would you feel the same way if it was a conservative voting athlete whacking Biden, for example?
Okay, hear this out, okay? I would not like it because they would be wrong, and what is being said by the Olympians now is correct. But the reason that I wouldn't like it is not because I don't support the fact that people can and even should, in many cases, if they feel compelled, use their platform and their influence to advocate for what they believe in. So actually, you can't go find any clips of me being like, shut up and dribble, or people shouldn't talk about politics in this space or that space. I agree we're all a little bit tired with everything being politicized, but in a sense, it's kind of one of those moments where you're called to. So for me, I am morally consistent on this because I think you absolutely have that right. The reason that I'm critical of Nicki Minaj, for example, is not because I think she should just stick to music. It's just because I disagree with what she's saying. And so I'll criticize what she's saying and not the fact that she's saying something.
You know, to talk about what those athletes said right there at the beginning, there's no problem with that. Look, it might be a little bit misguided in some cases because you're kind of standing up for illegal activity, if you will, because once again, these people are violating our sovereignty. I wouldn't necessarily call them patriots. Sure, they are showing a little bit of patriotism by representing our country in the world through their athleticism, right? But their personal statements, if you will, hey, that's their opinions. That's just fine, misguided or not, right? They can state those opinions. They can hold those opinions. Once again, some people are just ill-informed on certain situations, right? I understand that. I blame that on the corporate press. I'm not going to blame that on them. I blame that on the people that are charged with actually informing the public, misinforming the public about what's not giving them all the information, which is the main thing that the corporate press does. They give you a narrative. They don't give you all the information most of the time, right? They give you a one-sided perspective and that's it. They leave out context and all kinds of nonsense. It's really a epidemic, if you will, of the corporate press to just be so biased and one-sided. It's just insane, if you ask me. But let's get to what Luke Beasley said right quick, because what he's saying right there is just hypocritical, if you will. He's like, I'm not criticizing them for saying what they're saying. I'm criticizing them for what they're saying. It's like, dude, yes, that's the point. That's exactly what we're doing. We're calling them out for being misinformed, my guy, which, like, he's talking about all this authoritarianism and all this. I love that line, by the way. Like, this is something that it's a consistent through line with leftists in this country and Democrats. They're like, oh, this fascist takeover and this is all authoritarianism. Like, look to your history books, by the way. What authoritarian dictatorship would allow this level of criticism? Once again, you know, they try to say, oh, well, Donald Trump is using the Department of Justice. He's weaponizing it against his political opponents. Oh, well, he's not doing a very effective job of that, is he? He's not. Look to the court cases. Most of that has been a failure, right? They're pointing out crimes. They're going after people that have committed crimes. Just because you don't want to admit that doesn't mean that the administration is wrong for doing it, right? It's going to happen. People commit crimes on both sides. So once again, in these people's mind, anytime an administration goes after anybody that's on the other side of the aisle for any crimes that they actually committed, it's not legitimate because it's political weaponization. That would mean that these people are absolutely immune from any sort of prosecution. That's ridiculous. That's not a country of law and order, by the way. Like, it's just a ridiculous statement because that's what we are doing. Like, once again, there's the many voices out there. There's a bunch of disparate voices, if you will. A lot of people don't want these athletes to say anything at all. Some people just want them to say something so they can admonish them, and other people just groan and they're like, I don't want to hear about this, blah, 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 blah. They're wrong, whatever it may be. There's so many different opinions out there, right? That's what's usually, like Luke, like when people criticize something somebody else says, it's usually because it's what they are saying, the content of their speech, not their right to say it. We're not telling you to shut up because you don't have a right to speak. We're telling you to shut up because you're making yourself look like an idiot right now. Just like I do on a consistent basis, right? I am a human. I get things wrong. Which I am sure there are going to be people in the comment section of this video saying, you are wrong. Yes, I have been wrong before. It's like, address the point. Address what I said. Tell me how I am wrong. Don't just go in the comment section like a retard and tell me you're stupid and then leave and not ever respond or address anything that I'm stupid for. Right? It's just ridiculous. Like, I usually ignore those people, by the way. Or I'll say, God bless you, or something like that. Or like, well, that was a highly intelligent, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'll go on and say something of that nature. But it's just like, dude, you can't see. Once again, he's blinded. He's in search of this forest, and he just can't see it because there's so many dadgum trees in the way. A lot of people, there is a lot of hypocrisy out there, folks. I've engaged in that sometimes, right? Like, I don't know, I could break this down and explain it, but I said before Trump got elected, if Donald Trump, violates court orders, I'm going to be steaming mad. I'm going to be yelling and screaming at the camera. And then 2 weeks ago, I'm like, yes, I think Donald Trump violating these court orders is a good thing, because when I said the previous statement, I did not anticipate judges ruling outside of their authoritative bounds, which has been happening a lot. Not every case, right? Some cases are legitimate that rule against the Trump administration, and I don't speak out about those. But the ones where, like Judge Boasberg or whatever, trying to order 2 planes that are in El Salvadorian airspace to turn around, does he really think he has the authority to tell those planes to turn around? And as a matter of fact, no, he doesn't. He's a lower court judge, right? There was another case where there's all these judges, issuing these rulings, trying to, Donald Trump's trying to claw back grant money that's going to nonsensical, just retarded stuff, if you will, like keeping track of disparate health outcomes for certain communities instead of all communities. But anyway, it's grant money. Donald Trump's like, well, this is a waste of time. And he's trying to claw that back. And this judge is like, no, you must keep the money tap on. Well, I don't think that that's how our constitutional order was set up. I don't think that a judge is supposed to have the power of the purse. I don't think that's how that's supposed to work. But look, I understand it's much deeper than that. I'm just addressing a few concerns here, right? But they make these rulings that you can look to, not necessarily that last one I was talking about, but you could look to judges. There's several of them that they issue these rulings. It gets to appeals, and the appeals court just completely admonishes the lower court judge because they're ruling outside of their authoritative bounds, right? Outside of the Constitution. And there's been several that they have found that their rulings were illegal. Folks, that is happening in this country, where these judges have just lost their freaking minds. I think that's wrong. And yes, if a judge issues an illegal order, I think he should violate that. Is that hypocrisy? No, because what I was talking about previously, that was if Donald Trump violates a legitimate order. I didn't say that. So you could look at it as hypocrisy, but, when you break it all down, things change sometimes. People's opinions change, so it's not necessarily hypocrisy. But what he was just saying right there was just, like, he didn't put any critical thought into that at all. But let's keep going.
When I see the images, I'm sorry, it hurts. It hurts to me. That's why in every position I can help, speaking up to be a better society. No, I want to change anything, but I tried, I will be there. Look what happened in the United States of America. With Rene Good and Alex Pretty. So have been killed. One is an informer, the NHS. Imagine NHS, 5, 6 people around him, go on the grass, 10 shots. Tell me how you can defend that.
Now, what was the reason I was slightly cynical is I don't think he ever does that when Manchester City are winning everything. I think it may have been a distraction tool. I'm not saying for a moment he doesn't believe it, but it kind of plays into what you were saying, that there's no kind of big backlash now when someone like Guardiola does that, for example.
Well, and also there's hypocrisy there because he earns his money from a regime that uses labour who have their human rights abused. You can, whenever, I mean, the thing that I think is perhaps interesting as a former sports person is that we often deify these people. They're heroes because of their athletic prowess in the way that singers are heroes because they're wonderful artists. That doesn't mean their opinions on politics are going to be even mildly cogent. You mentioned the singer who said at the Grammys the other night, "This is stolen land." I just couldn't help thinking, you know, she probably lives in a huge pile. And having said it's stolen, what's going to stop people coming and taking it from her? Thieves.
Well, they have. They've actually been round. They've been round to Billie Eilish's mansion in California and said, "Well, if it's stolen, we're having it."
I mean, one thing it does give you the opportunity is to puncture the rank hypocrisy of many people who leverage a system to accrue wealth, and then they turn on the system, not realising that if they did so and their arguments were followed to its logical conclusion, they would lose everything. But on the issue that Joe said about we mustn't sanitise sport, you know, we must keep sanity. Some of us go to sport. I go to Brentford, Premier League club, to escape. We need to get away from politics. That doesn't mean we're non-political. It's because we care about politics. We need a safety valve. Most of the fans I talk to at Brentford, when they pump out anti-racism messages, it's not that they don't care about racism or geopolitics or the level of interest rates. They want to take a break from it. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a healthy thing. Sure, these people can go and express an opinion, as I say, on Substack or if they get an invitation to Newsnight, but not on the field of play. We are going to watch them play football, not to give us their political opinions. And that distinction, I think, mustn't be missed.
I do agree with that. I want to bring David back in here because before we. Well, hang on one sec, Luke. I want to bring David back in. I want to just switch gears to another story before we finish. And this is the ongoing story of transgender athletes in women's sport and the revelation or admission by Iman Khalif, the Algerian boxer who, of course, won an Olympic gold medal competing in women's boxing at the Paris Olympics, having been banned from the World Championships for having male chromosomes. In an interview with French magazine L'Equipe, Khalif has now admitted to having not just a female phenotype, but also the SRY gene, which is essentially the start button of male development. And she said, yes, and it's natural. I have female hormones. People don't know this, but I've already lowered my testosterone levels for competitions. But has resolutely so far refused to have a sex test and plans to defend the title in the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. She said, or he, whatever you want to call Iman Khalif, says for the next games, if I have to take a test, I will. I've no problem with that. But surely the easiest way around this is just to take a sex test. If there's any doubt, as there clearly is about Iman Khalif, just take the test and make the result public.
Sure, and to ensure competitive fairness there, and the headline that you're talking about that came out a week or two ago, that was the least surprising headline that I've ever seen, and this is why we've befriended Riley Gaines, and we've tried to give her a platform on our show, and I know that you have done the same. And I will say, I just wanted to follow up quickly too. I, as an American, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage for not knowing the poppy armband situation, but Pierce, it does sound similar to an issue here with Jonathan Isaacs, the NBA player, who had become famous for just going about his normal routine when everyone else is making a point to take a knee or to make a cultural statement. And, I think it was Dolly Parton who said, I don't touch on hot button issues because when I do, half the people will hate me and the other half thought that I already agreed with them. And so this idea that this new age mentality that we always have to speak out, I do think that that's wrong. And as far as, when it comes to America specifically at the Olympic Games, I do take issue with the fact that America's imperfections are being used as reasoning for ripping down the entire foundation of our civilization. There is no nation, there is no community which is absolutely perfect. So of course you could critique it, but it seems like America is a country so great, even the people who hate it won't leave.
Wait, you're saying
Luke Beasley, you're shaking your head there. Why?
Yeah. You're saying people criticizing the Trump government is causing the foundation of our society to collapse. I would say him violating a bunch of constitutional principles is way more degrading to the foundation of our system. Him going after media outlets that he doesn't like, locking up journalists, people being killed in the streets and then smeared afterwards. His actions in degrading by turning the DOJ into just a political weapon, and on and on and on we go. That's what's degrading the foundation of our system. I think people calling that out is the most American thing ever. And I see that as us trying to correct course.
I think this issue is so much bigger than just one administration. Again, we're going as far back as talking about Michael Jordan in the 90s. We're talking about Muhammad Ali in the 60s. This is so much bigger than just one single administration. Quite frankly, I don't think it would matter who is in the office right now.
Wait, but how,
we are pressuring so many athletes to speak out. If you don't speak out on whatever the imperfection is, again, not administration, but whatever there is imperfect about America as a system, if you don't do it, it means you don't care. I think that is unfair.
That's a different claim. I totally agree. If you don't want to speak out, you don't need to speak out, and people can react however they like. You made a claim that sounded like if people choose to speak out, or if there's a culture of calling out what is this insane authoritarianism that we're witnessing, then that itself is a degrading agent to the foundation of our society.
No, not at all.
That is what you laid out. Okay, cool.
No, that's why I mentioned
hang on. Luke, on the separate issue of transgender athletes in women's sport.
Yes.
What is your view of that?
Do whatever is going to keep fairness and transports this and transports that. Got it. Good.
Well, no, what is your view, though? Should they be allowed to compete?
Take the sex test, damn it.
Well, why not?
No, I said take it.
No, but what do you actually believe?
I believe that. I'm agreeing with you. Take the sex test.
So just to be clear, you think that transgender women should not be allowed to compete in women's sport, or?
I mean, yeah, I think that would be fine if leagues decide to add that restriction. And then if you have a certain way that if you transition this far, their advantage goes away, I'm fine with that too. Whatever is going to allow for the most fairness is good with me.
Yeah, see, Luke Beasley exemplifies part of the problem in this country because he's calling out all these constitutional norms and principles that Donald Trump is violating, but he can't name one example, right? Name an example, for crying out loud. He's talking about all this authoritarianism and all this nonsense. Well, once again, what authoritarian regime allows for this level of criticism? To call him an illegitimate authoritarian? What a regime would allow for that? He's talking about going after, corporate press outlets and all this other stuff that he doesn't like. Well, they violated the law, my guy. They did something they weren't supposed to. Once again, our media apparatus in this country has gotten so one-sided, and it's not very fair. They've shown their bias. It's not fair at all. Once again, you could call it free speech, but it's so biased. Donald Trump is just pointing these things out. He's saying, look, be fair. CBS got the memo, for crying out loud, and they're trying to fix what's going on. They're right. Once again, we're looking to this society. This is part of the problem. A lot of these people, they believe that Donald Trump is just evil incarnate, and that is the furthest thing from the truth. They can't see any good. And then they claim that the whole of MAGA is a cult, right? Despite the fact that most of MAGA disagrees about a lot of what Trump is doing right now. And when that does happen, they're like, oh, the coalition is falling apart. They refuse to see, once again, what's actually going on here. No, this is just, we're criticizing Donald Trump because he deserves criticism. We're not calling him out for some authoritarian nonsense because that is nonsense. It's garbage. These people are pretending that there's this dictator in office right now, and that's the furthest thing from the truth. Donald Trump is trying to reimpose law and order back in this country, and these people are pretending that we were taken over by a despot. And I'm sure I'll have some people go into the comments and parrot those talking points. But look, I can't take you seriously when you're ignoring reality. That's it. I can't take you seriously. Look, if you have a genuine criticism for the Trump administration, bring it. But if you're going to just go off about all this nonsensical garbage, I don't care about that, to be honest with you. I'm going to ignore you, but that's the problem, right? These people are just losing their freaking minds for no apparent reason. They're making up a lot of nonsense. That is the problem, and Luke Beasley is exemplifying this, and it's just completely insane. And like the last little bit right there, Luke Beasley is trying to pretend that these culture war issues don't matter, or he's pretending that it's a distraction from Donald Trump's destruction of America or whatever the hell he thinks is going on here, right? We're trying to get back to some sort of norm here, and Democrats are pretending that it's the end of the freaking world. And when you signal that to your base, that it's the end of the freaking world, all these constitutional principles are being violated, like name one. I don't see it. I read news all day long, my guy. I see the good, the bad, and the ugly from the Trump administration. I call out the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's all I do, for goodness sakes. But Donald Trump's immigration crackdown, it's not an immigration crackdown. That's what it's being called. It's a illegal alien crackdown. That's who he's going after. And this is how people get stirred up into a fervor and just hate the man illegitimately, right? You can dislike somebody, right? That's fine. But don't make up things about the guy. That just makes you look unserious. Makes you look very unserious. Let's keep going. There's another good little interaction right here. Check this out.
It was
Luke, you want to jump in there?
Strange time for humanity.
What are we doing, people? We have an assault on our democratic republic like we haven't seen in generations. And we're still talking, we're just like jerking each other off right now, talking about how, oh my gosh, some statements people have made about what is a woman is kind of irrational. Okay, cool, good. We've established that point. People should be more clear about the difference between biological sex and your gender identity. We should have fairness in sports. Good. And now let's get back to the people you said someone could die. You know what we're going to wait, but you know what we're going to look back on when we look at this moment in history? We're going to think about how ridiculous it was that people were blowing out of proportion random culture war issues instead of talking about the people who are actually dying, not the potentialists who are dying, the people who are actually dying at the hands of our government as people with masks are roaming our streets and ripping citizens out of their cars. And we're talking about, for 30 minutes, we're talking about how should people speak out at sporting events or not, and then trans sports. It's mind-bending.
So you're taking people out of your country who've broken into your country?
Okay, let Matthew respond to that.
Sorry, what's
the
so mad about
tragedy is that people who don't recognise the absolute outrage about woke overreach and dismiss.
I already told you I disagree with woke overreach. What are we doing?
As culture war trivia, look at the campaign slogan that Trump pumped out relentlessly in the last month of the last presidential election. Kamala is for they, them. Trump is for you. I don't like Trump at all. Most of my columns absolutely despise the drift towards authoritarianism. But the reason Trump had the platform, the reason he won the election, is because of these culture war issues. A huge number of people in America were completely appalled by the pronouns.
I agree
men
with you,
competing
Bubba.
in women's sport. So don't dismiss this. Talking about it is very important because it is the impetus behind the drift that we're seeing.
Okay, so now that we've established we agree on that, isn't it, especially within the context of Olympians speaking out, as we were talking about before, would you not agree that people overemphasizing things? It's not that you shouldn't talk about them. It's that putting overemphasis as to distract from, like you talked about in the 2024 campaign. Do you know why it was so important for Trump to scare people about an issue that most likely wasn't going to affect them? Kamala's for they, them, and you play some clip where she has already tried to clarify that she didn't mean trans prisoner, blah, blah, blah. That was so necessary for his campaign. It's because if Americans weren't so distracted by certain programs to focus on those types of issues so much, not that they shouldn't at all, but so much, if they can get them to focus on that, if they were focusing on the more important issues, there's no way they would have supported Trump, who we knew before the election was going to do all of this. It was his plan. He specified it. His economic agenda was looked at by a bunch of economists completely incoherent.
Luke,
this is bad.
The problem, Luke.
You're the problem, Piers.
Luke. Here's the problem.
Just kidding. Love you.
Is that you had 4 years of Donald Trump, and people like you were shouting away for 4 years about how he's the new Hitler, blah, 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 blah.
Never said that.
Then you had
I never
4
said that.
years without, well, then you had 4 years without Trump. And after 4 years without Trump, more of you in America voted for Trump to come back than voted for him originally. So whilst you may not like it, and it's very clear that you have a very clear idea of the issues that are important to you, actually they weren't shared by a majority of your fellow Americans at the last election. They cared about other things, including the absurd woke agenda, including immigration, including foreign wars and so on. You may not like it or agree with it, but you are one of the reasons Donald Trump got reelected.
Well, guess what?
You were
Guess
fighting that front,
you might not like
and
it,
everybody else was
but
talking
now,
about that front.
Listen, more Americans believe Biden now, based on recent polls, was doing better as president than Trump currently is. So Americans realize,
Biden
Piers,
was a zombie.
I was right and you were wrong.
Biden was
Piers,
a zombie.
Senile.
Well, you didn't respond to what I said. Polling reveals Americans are feeling that I was right and you were wrong. They actually are regretful over electing Trump, and it would have helped to prevent that situation. Last thing,
well, I've not expressed a view about whether it was right or wrong. I'm not American.
I believe on this subject.
What I do know is that what I do know, Luke, hang on. What I do know is that the left in America, for 3 years of Biden's 4 years in power, lied to themselves and to the world about the cognitive disrepair of their leader. The guy was gaga by the end. And the fact that he was even contemplating running again was an insult to democracy of the kind you should abhor. But you don't, because it was your guy. And that's part of the problem with the way that politics is done in America.
Do you watch my show, Piers?
If it's your guy, it's fine. If it's the other guy, boom. That's the problem.
First
Anyway,
of all, I don't
fascinating
think,
debate.
what?
By the way,
That's it. I've made my final statement.
Up.
The beauty of having my own show is I can make a final statement and not invite anyone to respond.
So once again, Luke Beasley exemplifies everything that's wrong with this country. Give an example of something Donald Trump is doing that is violating our constitutional principles. Please do something, because he's talking about what's going on with the illegal immigration, right? Well, that is our laws. These people are not supposed to be in the country. Once again, there is no problem with enforcing laws, right? Going and ripping American citizens out of their car, that's because those American citizens were ramming their freaking cars into ICE vehicles. Once again, and stopping an American citizen and asking for their ID is very normal. This is just insane. They're taking these little issues that are nonsensical and blowing them way out of proportion. Right? Sure. Is the Trump administration making mistakes? Yes. They dropped the ball with Jeffrey Epstein, right? They're doing certain things that I don't like. I'm not going to get into all those right now because it's way too many to just get into. But most of what they're doing is on the up and up. 77 million Americans voted for Trump to deport the criminal aliens. That's why they voted for him. And he's trying to pretend like, oh, well, if we weren't being distracted by culture war issues, we would have never voted for Donald Trump. Well, the number one issue was immigration, illegal immigration. Sorry. That was the number one issue, for crying out loud. That's why most people voted for Donald Trump. Actually, I take that back. The reason people voted for Donald Trump was because of the alternative. Because Donald Trump seems a lot more sane than any Kamala Harris administration would bring. Right? All of it. But once again, he just simply can't believe that people would vote for law and order for some reason. Because what Biden was doing was violating the law by opening that border. He is the one that actually violated vast amounts of constitutional principles. First, I'll say it, he opened the freaking border. That violates our law, several laws as a matter of fact. They abused the asylum process by just giving almost everybody asylum. He vastly expanded temporary protected status illegitimately without, in other words, there was no reason to give them temporary protected status. So he abused that. He not only was trying to dole out a whole bunch of money that was not congressionally approved, he did that several times. There was, the student loan forgiveness program where he told the Supreme Court to kick rocks, get out of here. I'm going to do it anyway. Vax mandates. What else was there? Oh, the big one. How about having the FBI get onto social media or have this backdoor access to social media, and because people are saying things that you don't like, hey, let's have these people banned off of social media, right? That is the biggest violation of people's First Amendment rights in this country's history. And you want to talk about Donald Trump violating constitutional norms? How many right-wing publications were shut down under the Biden administration? There were several, as a matter of fact. How many left-wing publications have been shut down under the Trump administration? None. How many people has Donald Trump had backdoor access to social media and shut them out of social media? Well, we haven't seen the evidence for that if it's happening. There's no evidence out there for that, right? You can point to all the mistakes. I don't know, the signal gate. That was a problem right there, right? Looking to the Alex Paredes situation. Sure, does ICE cross the line? Yes, they do. You cannot go and tell people they cannot film ICE. That is a problem. Those people need to be disciplined. You cannot go tell people that you're going to put them on a domestic terrorist watch list if you don't have a legitimate reason for doing so, right? ICE should not be doing these things, right? If these people were legitimate domestic terrorists, then you just expose that for what it is. Expose the evidence as to why. You don't go and tell them those things. ICE agents are making massive mistakes all over the place, right? They're pepper spraying a lot of people illegitimately, right? But in certain cases, I've seen some illegitimate pepper sprays, right? But most of that can be explained by these people are impeding ICE. They are obstructing ICE. That is a violation of the law. They are lucky that they got bear sprayed instead of arrested for obstruction. That is the graciousness of the Trump administration in many cases. Now, I don't like the fact that they're using rubber bullets on a lot of these people because innocent, peaceful protesters get hit. I don't like that. But those people are not the targets of those rubber bullets. They need to be more discriminate about who they are hitting here, right? They need to be above board. They need to stop making these mistakes, right? We got bad apples all over the place. I can admonish both administrations for things. Right, like the Jeffrey Epstein thing, that was an absolute no-win situation. They dropped the ball a little bit with that. A lot bit with that. But, it is what it is. But what the Trump administration is doing is trying to restore law and order back to this country. And Democrats are fighting tooth and nail, just creating this entire fictional garbage that some people believe, but most people that are paying attention knows that none of this is real. None of it's real. And they are pretending that it is. And a lot of people that don't know any better are just believing the nonsense instead of doing their due diligence and using their critical thinking skills. Well, let's see what constitutional principles he's violating here. Right? You want to talk about the birthright citizenship? Well, that constitutional principle happens to be being fought in the courts. So how is that a violation of the Constitution? It's not. He's actually doing it the proper way by running it through the courts. Once we get a Supreme Court decision, if they don't codify that, then we're going to have a problem. I don't think it's constitutional for people to use our laws, a kind of a loophole in the language, if you will, because they didn't explicitly state criminal aliens, to be able to come into this country, to have a baby, to not only anchor that baby here, but anchor themselves here, because that's why they're doing it. I'm just getting sick and tired of all these people making these illegitimate arguments as if they're real. It's nonsense. It's like the Alex Peretti and Renee Good. You look at the Renee Good situation, I cannot spot much wrong with what ICE did there. Is it bad that American citizens are being killed? Yes, that's a bad thing, and I wish it wouldn't happen. But when you look at everything in totality, everything about Renee Good everything wrong about that situation was Renee Good's fault. Alex Peretti, right? He put himself into a very dangerous situation, and an ICE officer made a mistake. Right? The punishment did not fit the crime. But, once again, like I said, when you inject yourself and start fighting with cops, because it can't be denied that he was resisting arrest. Although some people are doing that, even though they've seen the video. They still say it's an execution. No, that's an unfortunate set of circumstances where this guy is fighting with cops in clear violation of the law, and an ICE agent made a mistake. The ICE agents that actually shot, they didn't do anything wrong in that situation, because they are trained to where when they hear gun, 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 and you hear a gunshot, you are trained to eliminate the target. That is for the safety of the officers and other people, because you don't know what the person with the gun is going to do. And those ICE agents didn't know that dude didn't pull, right? They didn't see, they weren't cognizant that one ICE agent pulled the gun out of his waist, and that gun accidentally went off. We can all see that that's what happened. Right? You can put that together. We don't have concrete facts that gun went off. But you look at the sequence of events, slow down, without your freaking deranged blinders on, and you can see that is the highest probable outcome. That's what happened. Guy sees a gun, pulls the gun out while yelling gun, gun, gun. That's a massive mistake. Massive mistake. And got that guy killed. Straight up. It's just insane what's going on. I love, for the most part, 85% of what Trump is doing. 85%. You might disagree with his economic plan, right? You might disagree with that. But it remains to be seen whether it's going to work or not, right? There's a lot of economic indicators that are showing what he's doing with the tariffs and all these trade negotiations is working. But once again, it's not concrete yet. We got to wait and see. If our economy stays at this level of growth for a little while, and we can continue these trends, this is massive, folks. It's going to be a net positive for the country. The implosion hasn't happened yet. But I think I've been rambling for a while, so you guys let me know what y'all think about all of this down in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you guys, whether you're deranged or not. Don't care. But yeah, y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click the join button. Sign up and become a member. It's the best way to help this channel expand and grow, folks. And look, like I always say, go check out my regular videos, right? We cover news. We read the news articles. We go over all that. I point out all the manipulative language that's in there. And we kind of analyze things from a rational perspective, if you will, critically think about what's being said. And that's it, I've got I've got opinions. I've got my biases or whatever. I'm a Christian conservative. I'm Christian first. That's most important. So, check that out. And, here's my message of the day. Look, we've got to, if we are going to be Christians and proclaim that, right? Like I've been telling everybody hardcore, look, I'm Christian, right? That's what I am. That means I'll love you even if you hate me. right? I think everybody should be saved. That's what I'm trying to do here. You need to ask Jesus to come into your heart, forgive you of your sins, repent, and go get yourself baptized. Because that is important. Both of those sequences are important. Those are massive steps to a better life, right? Trying to not sin, trying to walk that path of righteousness, right, is the better thing for this country. That is not to say that you hate LGBTQ, no, because we love everybody, right? But Christians refuse to celebrate sin. And that's what the progressive secularists want us to do. They want us to affirm their delusions and celebrate their sinful degeneracy, and we're not going to do that. I don't hate those people. I don't hate anybody. Right? But I'm not going to engage in that, and I'm going to voice my opposition for that, because once again, folks, if God-fearing people refuse to take control of whatever's going on in culture, godless people will. They will impose whatever their beliefs are over everything. We've got to have some sort of a balance here, right? I'm not saying they can't exist. I'm saying you're not going to get full control over the country, because that's what they're trying to do, right? At the same time, they cry and scream about Christian nationalism while trying to impose their own form of nationalism over the country, right? Whatever that may look like, that's what they are trying to do. That is their end goal, is progressive secular nationalism over this country, right? The country was created as a Christian nationalist country, right? With a secular government. That's it. That's what I'm trying to conserve. I don't want this nonsense that they're bringing, because it violates my faith. And I have a right to express that. And you're not going to shut me up. I will voice my opposition, and I encourage every Christian out there to do the same. Because like I said, folks, if we don't, they will, and we will be snuffed out. Absolutely. You guys try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.